Hello and happy Friday to you. It's Friday, February 4th, as we record this webinar live. I am Nate Johnson, the immediate past president of the National Weather Association. I'd like to welcome you to the first of our 2022 webinar series, the NWA webinars. We have a slate of these set up all the way through the spring. We do them all the way through the year, but traditionally we usually use the first one to introduce and get to know our incoming president of the NWA. And it's my privilege to be able to introduce to you Dr. Kathy Sherman-Morris from Mississippi State University, who is the 2022 president of the NWA. Kathy, nice to have you here.
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Just a little bit of background before we get into the conversation. The National Weather Association, we have a board of directors. Each one of those directors is elected to a 3-year term. And then the president, or the president-elect actually is what we elect, is also elected to a 3-year term to serve on the board. And then each one of those years has a specific role that the incoming person will play. And so I'm on my 3rd year. I'm the immediate past president. Kathy is the current president. And then Christina Crow from the National Weather Service is our president-elect. And again, each one of those offices, if you will, has a specific set of duties and obligations and responsibilities and privileges that come along with it over the course of that year and then over the course of the 3 years. The president-elect year, a lot of times is for folks, you have to have board service in order to be able to be on to be nominated for president-elect. So it's not so much getting used to the board, but it is getting used to the deeper operation of the NWA and that sort of thing, so that you can hit the ground running in your president year. And Kathy's been really engaged as a board member in the past and here with this term as well. And really excited to see what she's got in store for us and the association as we go. Kathy, we'll start with the basics. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into weather, and what you do when you're not doing NWA stuff.
Yeah, so I'm currently a professor at Mississippi State University in the Department of Geosciences. I'm also interim assistant dean for the College of Arts and Sciences. So getting a little bit of my feet wet with administration, in addition to being the president. I am originally from Pennsylvania. I went to a small school, Mansfield University, for my undergrad, and I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I wanted to teach. I was undeclared, and my favorite geography. I like geography. The whole time growing up, I loved learning about places. I like drawing maps. If you can kind of see behind me, I have like a million National Geographics from like the 70s. So my favorite geography class at Mansfield was weather and climate. And so I didn't even know what like you could do with that except for be on TV. But my advisor said, well, you should think about graduate school in meteorology, and a program that has broadcast meteorology is Mississippi State. There was also one in Vermont and Linden State, and I didn't want to be in the cold any longer because Mansfield is in northern Pennsylvania and it's pretty cold until like May. Came to Mississippi State for my master's, and I thought I wanted to do TV, but I kind of decided it wasn't really for me. So I went on to Florida State for my PhD in geography, and then I came back to Mississippi State in 2003 to, I was an instructor for a few years and then eventually a professor. So I've been here since then. I research how people respond to weather. So how do they take shelter in a tornado, or how do they perceive risk from a different like weather situation, a hurricane, a winter storm or tornado, things like that. So I do some research, and I'm not teaching this semester because of the administrative appointment, but normally I teach classes that are sort of like in my field like that, like weather and society, hazards, applied climatology I've taught already. So I guess that's my professional background. I have a husband, John, He also works in the department. He does GIS and takes care of our GIS lab and our computers and things like that. And I have a pandemic puppy. I adopted a dog last end of last February while we were still working from home. And her name's Buttercup. So she's super cute. Mostly good. We had some problems with her this week, but mostly
good. I go back to the song "Build Me Up, Buttercup." So
yep.
Sure she
Every
does that
time I
from
hear
time
it.
Awesome. How did you get involved in the NWA? I mean, the NWA is focused, I think, on operational meteorology. You said at one point you're thinking TV might be a direction that you wanted to go. Tell us a little about your NWA journey.
Yeah, it started when I came to Mississippi State for my master's. We had two professors, Mark Bankley and Dave Arnold, who were involved with the National Weather Association. And this was 1997. They got us all to be members. They took a van of us to, I guess it was the second year, to Norman, or I can't remember if it was Oklahoma City or Norman, but we did visit Norman while we were there. My first conference though was Reno, and I've been a member ever since. I've since become a lifetime member since it's so long. But so I owed them that I got involved in the first place. I wasn't super involved initially. I mean, it was just sort of like, you're a member every year, you pay your dues, you read the newsletter, you try to, it helps you keep up with what's going on with other people in the field, and to meet people and stuff like that. But back when we had paper renewal forms, every year I would check the box like, yes, I'd like to be involved in this and that and the other thing. And I think the broadcast committee was like one of the things that I checked a couple times. And so it wasn't until, I don't remember what year, but you actually asked me if I wanted to join that committee. So that was how I sort of got involved in more than just being a member.
Awesome. And it's been a few years since then, but you've been on the board, had a bigger perspective and a bigger role. What do you think? How do you think the NWA is doing in 2022? Obviously we're still in the pandemic. I'd like to think that we're maybe coming out of it now as Omicron starts to wane, but never want to put a deadline on something like that. Let's just hope we know we'll get there eventually. But coming out of the pandemic, or maybe on the backside of the pandemic, hopefully, how do you feel like we're doing as an association?
Yeah, and I share your thoughts, definitely. I hope this is kind of the last throes of the pandemic. I think we're doing good. I think we have a great leader. Janice Bunting is a tremendous CEO. She really understands how to run an organization. So we're tremendously lucky to have her. And we're in good shape financially. We're stable. We've had a couple successful meetings, even having to make last minute decisions to cancel the in-person component one year and to have hybrid meeting the next year. We've still been able to do well with meeting attendance, and the hybrid meeting, or the meeting that was remote. I mean, that was like attendance was through the roof. So we've had some successful meetings, and so I think we're doing good that way. Excuse me. We have, like, the whole time I've been on the board, been going through a process to sort of formalize our governance and to go from being sort of an organization where a lot of things are just sort of known or communicated, orally, or even just written down, but not like formally written down. So we had new bylaws a few years ago. We're working on, formalizing different policies for how things should work, how, the next slate of officers should, like, what they need to do. We have formalizing documents that sort of, everybody knows what they're doing. So I think all those sorts of things, the organization is in really good shape.
I remember coming in to the board in Dave Freeman's president year, And that was a big theme that we were sort of launching into this, that NWA was I don't want to say it was a boutique organization, but it was a smaller organization, felt very much like family. Like going to NWA meetings very much felt like a family reunion where you liked everybody, unlike most family reunions, right? And really felt like sort of coming home in a way. And there was a not to say that this is in any way bad, but there was sort of a lack of necessity to have this sort of formalization. Well, now as we've continued to grow, our meetings are larger, our membership is larger. We find that we need to sort of put some of this down on paper so that, when I came in my first term on the board was 6 or 7 years ago. The first year was the first year you just sorted it up because there wasn't anything to do that you could be prepared to come in. So your first year really was just learning how everything worked. And then by the time you got into your second year, you could start to really be effective. And maybe by your third year, you could really start to get things done. And I think a big goal in the last couple of years has been, to your point, formalizing. Christina Crow actually had a lot to do with this as part of the governance committee, on the board, where doing these pass down documents and everything, so that somebody coming into board service, can actually study up on it a little bit, have an idea of how things go, so that once they hit the ground in their first meeting, they can actually start to be effective really from day one. Because as we get bigger, we find that we need that effectiveness. We have more things that we want to do as an organization, and I'm really glad to hear that we're heading at. What do you think our future looks like? I know Todd Laricos 2 years ago, when he and I were having this conversation, we'd done some strategic thinking, in terms of the organization and where the weather enterprise might be in 10, 20, 30 years from now, what that means for us as an organization. How do you think we're doing, and how are we positioned for the future?
Yeah, well, you mentioned in talking about the organization as a whole, how we were like a community or a family. Well, I think one of the cool things that we'll see the NWA increase in the next couple of years is opportunities for collaboration and interaction. And it's one of the things I'm really excited about. And I hope during my term as president, we get to see it sort of rolled out more fully. But we're testing some processes now where people can join groups and interact online. So once we are actually able to roll that out to the members, I think it'll be a really great benefit for people, especially joining the organization, who may not know people, right away. You can get connected with people from all over the country and, outside the country as well. So I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about. We're also looking at different things to do at the annual meeting. How can we make it more engaging for members besides just, coming to a room and looking at PowerPoints all day? In addition to like having that option where people can't attend in person, or if they're at a location where it isn't practical, keeping that hybrid format. So I think we're looking at some new exciting ways to add interaction for the members.
So same question, but maybe for the broader weather enterprise. How do you feel like the weather enterprise as a whole, not just the weather service, not just private sector, not just TV, not just academia, not just all the different sort of legs of the stool. How do you think we're doing right now, and what do you think the future looks like for the broader enterprise?
Yeah, I don't feel as qualified, I think, to answer that question, because I mean, I know a lot of people in all the different sectors, but I mean, my home is academia, so I probably know that one, best. But I mean, I see some things that are encouraging. I think the funding picture looks brighter. That's another cross your fingers kind of thing, the federal funding. So I think that's good. I think we've seen over the past couple of years, our different sectors really have adapted to different conditions with the pandemic, and so much change and adjustments have happened over such a short period of time that I think having to deal with all that change quickly can put people in a better position to, progress into the future. So that doesn't really answer your question too well, but I think it's maybe just some things that that could help us with the future, or talk about, like, how we're doing right now. In terms of the future, I think some, like, and I don't really know, there's another one I'm not entirely able to, qualify the answer. But I mean, artificial intelligence, machine learning, to be used for weather forecasting. Those are some of the big things that I see kind of out there that I feel like they could be transformative for us as an industry or as a field. I think we don't quite know what it's going to look like and maybe how we need to interact with it just yet. But I feel like there needs to be a continual involvement of operational forecasters with the people that are doing, the background modeling and the computing, so that that connection isn't lost. So that's one thing that I do see playing into the future. One thing also is, I think we have a little bit more awareness of mental health right now, and there people experience a lot of challenges with being a meteorologist. Both like broadcasters dealing with stressful environments, and also operational forecasters predicting tornadoes and dealing with where is that tornado going to strike? Is it going to hit my family? At the same time, is it going to hit my community? Are people going to die? So there's a lot of stressors that meteorologists can be affected by, and I think we're starting to realize that mental health. I mean, we had realized this a few years back, but I think it's starting to become more of a prominent topic, that mental health is important, that it's something we as an industry and for each person has to be aware of.
And I think, thinking about mental health, one of the things that is, always there, especially in operational meteorology, is the role of the shifts that we have to work. The National Weather Service is rotating shifts as a general rule. And even the management level folks in offices are still working operational shifts most of the time. You also have, in TV, you have people that are getting up literally in the middle of the night to be on TV at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, or staying up until 10:30, 11:30 at work, and then getting home at midnight. And there are implications for that, right? There's implications for your family life. I know that I've talked to many a chief meteorologist on the TV side who has lamented the fact that they've been at work while their kids are growing up. Their kids, they're at home when they go to school, but by the time they get home from school, they've gone on to work.
Yeah.
And might get a dinner break for an hour or two if they live close to home, but they're really missing out on on their kids being growing up and that sort of thing. Is that also part of your thinking on mental health?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know. We've talked about this kind of like with some of the things that, what would you like to see the NWA do? I'd like to see us be a part of fostering some of those discussions. I don't quite know what we can do yet, but and if anybody is listening and has suggestions, feel free to reach out.
One sort of related topic to that, and this is an audience question, is burnout. And a lot of folks, I think, on the one hand, we get into this because we love weather, we're fascinated with the atmosphere, we like helping people. These are all traits that we tend to find run through most, especially operational meteorologists. But sometimes that can lead to a lack of maybe diversity in terms of things that we do outside of work, right? We're sort of, our work is our passion. Even though the work day stops, our passion is still there, but it's still work. And sometimes that can lead to burnout on top of the scheduling and the shift work and whatever else may happen. What do you think the NWA may be able to do about maybe helping with burnout?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? Yeah. As far as providing a community of other people that are experiencing the same, some people are experiencing the same sorts of issues, that can help to know that you're not alone. in some of the things you're facing. But if you're talking about like just nurturing experiences outside of work, um, the conference, getting away for a few days, seeing friends, going out and having a meal or a beverage or something with people that you care about you, and so things like that can help. It's also if we haven't really planned sessions for the annual meeting yet, but just it is something that's on my mind, that if we can continue to have things that are supportive of ideas around mental health, work-life balance, things like that.
I think that's really important that you mentioned the meeting as being a way to relieve burnout, right? And I think that's the last couple of years have just been brutal with the pandemic, and not only are we, limited from from traveling and going to the offices. I mean, everything is even if you're in an office, you might have a mask on part or most of the time, that kind of thing, and it all sort of limits it. And it really struck me earlier this week. I was at a memorial service for a former colleague at a previous job, and I was struck after it was over by just how nice it was to see people, like literally see them in real life as opposed to through a screen,
Yeah.
or through the sort of mediated form, and to have conversations, even masking, even outside on a cold day. It was just nice to catch up and to see people, and just how important our meeting is to being part of that. And one reason why we intended to go into last year with a hybrid meeting, then the Delta variant sort of really rose up, and we had some very difficult conversations about what we wanted to do in terms of the in-person component to the meeting and that sort of thing. And I feel like that we navigated that probably as well as we could have, given the circumstances that we had. We were able to have a small but I think powerful in-person component to the meeting, while still nurturing the folks that couldn't be there in person, and still sharing our science. One of the things that you mentioned was thinking about the annual meeting and rethinking some ideas about what that could look like in the future, to maybe not only be a better hybrid experience, but also to just be a better meeting experience. Do you have what can you share with us in terms of your thoughts on what a future NWA annual meeting might look like?
Yeah. So it's important to remember that nothing's set. The meeting's not planned yet. We're just very early in the planning stages. But we've talked about a couple things that should be interesting. We talked about how can we get more interaction among people attending the meeting. So we're going to explore having, small groups where we might have a session followed by a small group where people can interact. Like I said, don't know how that's going to look yet, if it's even going to be part of the schedule. I really can't say. We also are looking at posters, and is there a better way to have people share their work that they would normally, if they were coming in person, print out a paper poster, hang it up, stand by it. But online gives us a lot more opportunity to do different things. So what could we possibly explore with making like the poster session more interactive? So that's another thing. We're very early in the planning stages, but it's something that we're thinking about, how we can make it more engaging.
So, two related questions as we were talking about the annual meeting. We'll do the easy one first. One of the things as the president-elect over last year, you have time and sort of space to do is to think about a theme for the year and for the annual meeting. And if anybody hasn't had a chance to read the NWA newsletter for this month, you talk about it a little bit, but talk about your theme for the year and for this year's annual meeting, how you came up with it, and how you see it sort of evolving and guiding us through the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my theme is convergence. It's just one word.
I love it. There's
Yeah.
a certain Zen quality to it that I appreciate.
It has, at the very simplest level, a meaning of like coming together, whether you're talking about like winds coming together or ocean currents coming together or ideas coming together, people coming together. So at a very general level, it's just a coming together of ideas, people, whatever. But it's a little bit, I think, more than that. If you start looking at like what convergence means to some of the fields that use it. Um, and one of the ways I'm interpreting it for the annual meeting is that it's a coming together of different perspectives, whether you're talking about members with different experiences and perspectives, whether you're talking about incorporating like social scientists and meteorologists, broadcasters, and National Weather Service, the different sectors, the full range of member categories and perspectives. And so not just a coming together, but sort of the outcome will be more than like just the sum of the parts, if that makes sense. So like convergence research tries to look at things in new ways where it may not be, it's more than like what existing fields might bring to it. So it's sort of like with an eye to the future of if we bring these people into, hopefully in person, but we'll, like you said, we'll also have the hybrid experience. Bringing these people together, what great things can come out of it. So that's sort of where I'm interpreting convergence for the meeting.
I think one of the things you mentioned in the newsletter, or it may have been another conversation that we had, was about the idea that when you have winds converging, if other ingredients are in place, you get a thunderstorm. That can be part of the recipe of building a thunderstorm, and that's something that sort of bigger than the sum of its parts, right? You're bringing things together and then doing something really grand on a grand scale. So maybe the one of the other questions that we've get a lot, I've heard about it a lot from my friends, and I know a lot of people are interested to know, what are the plans for the annual meeting? And I'll preface this by saying that, last year's annual meeting, with the last minute changes that we had to make and whatnot, and just the ongoing nature of the pandemic has really sort of, we normally would be much farther along in having a place and dates and that sort of thing. What can you tell us about this year's annual meeting and when we might expect to know more about dates and location?
Yeah, we will be having one. It'll be it'll be roughly the same time period that it's been the past couple of years. We've been in fierce contract negotiations for about a month with especially one location, and we are hoping any day now to be able to announce the location. I was hoping maybe when it didn't come out yesterday that I'd be able to announce it this morning, but no emails from Janice on the go ahead for that. So I would say like just watch your email or your app or whatever for some updates. I really do expect it to be any day now, and we are hoping to open up the call for abstracts still middle of this month. So maybe somewhere in the range of February 15th to the 20th, somewhere in that range. So we are working on the call for abstracts, and we really expect that the annual meeting will be announced very soon.
So, and I think it's important to mention that the call for abstracts coming out about the same time that we normally would. A lot of these things are happening in parallel, right? So we're not just waiting on the location stuff to figure out the call for abstracts, but it's all happening in parallel.
Right. Yeah, we're the location that we're looking at and the different venues. We're looking at them with what we want to do in mind. So we have, we can do what we want to do. We just need the place to plug it in.
And I can say that, and I mentioned this in my last newsletter, President's Message at the end of last year, was none of the three locations that we were considering as finalists. We've never had an annual meeting in one of those locations before. And I'm really excited about all three of those places for different reasons. I'm really excited about the one where I think we're honing in on, and hopefully we can, button that down. But, again, we have to sort of let the contract negotiations sort out. And that's another thing is that the meeting and hospitality industry has been affected just like everybody else. We don't have to, our AMS, had to basically cancel most of the in-person part of their annual meeting last month, in part because of Omicron concerns, but in part because the venues didn't have enough staff because of Omicron and outages and that sort of thing, they were having problems, just having enough employees to be able to run the building. And so those are, a lot of the things that the hospitality industry and the meeting industry is still trying to dealing with. And that's part of the reason why it's taken so long.
Yeah,
But I think people are going to be really excited. Hopefully, once we're able to announce that within the next couple of days. I'm
yeah,
personally excited about all three of the finalist locations because I've never been to any of them other than, well, I won't even say that. So I've never been to any of them, and I'm really excited because I like traveling and like seeing the places. So one of the things that you mentioned about your theme was convergence, and I think one thing that we talk about a lot about bringing different parts of the weather enterprise together are for some of the high impact weather events, hazardous weather, especially whether it's short fuse stuff like tornado warnings. I know you've done some research on tornado warning response, that sort of thing. Um, but also for bigger events, whether it's a big winter storm. We've seen a couple of these in the Northeast. We had one basically stretching from Canada to Mexico this past week, affecting everywhere from Chicago to Dallas, to Pittsburgh to Ohio, this sort of thing. What can we as a community do to better communicate these situations in terms of both what we know and what we don't know and when we might know it, and how can bringing all of the different parts of the NWA together to do that, to converge, how do you see that as maybe improving our ability to communicate that information to society?
yeah. I mean, it's a very complicated question, with a very complicated answer, um, because there's a lot of different parts. There's a lot of different things that you have to think about, and different situations, these things play out differently. So, like, no two situations are completely the same. But as far as some things that we can do and how might we learn from each other, I mean, there are people like me that attend who study people. So I've been able to present the last couple of years on some research that we've been doing. um, Broadcasters have that connection with their audiences, and it's important to build that connection, to get to know who your viewers are, to know what's important to them, to know their sort of level of, how technical can you get and they still understand what you're saying, taking into account a lot of those different types of things. And then you have the operational forecasters, the research meteorologists, who are more involved with the production of the warnings, and you know things like that. The forecast. Not that broadcasters aren't involved in forecast. I didn't mean to say that, but so you have just the opportunity to maybe to help different groups understand what the other group is responsible for, and sort of
Mhm.
the conditions that sort of frame their decisions, what their bosses expect from them, and what what their goals are, what they need to get done. So I think it helps to have those sorts of interactions.
Mhm.
Um,
And we're seeing, and maybe to dovetail on that, I mean, I feel like we've seen a shift in the last few years as the communication aspect of everything that we do becoming more and more important. And there's a couple of different, lenses for that. Number one, we're seeing the National Weather Service, shifting more toward decision support service and offering, IDSS. The idea here is that we're taking this forecast and then supporting people in making decisions. We're also seeing that becoming, more and more important on the broadcast front, where we have a typical broadcast meteorologist will come in and whereas 20 or 30 years ago they might have had two newscasts, maybe they typed out something for the newspaper for the next morning, and then they had all of this other time to dive into data, to do hand analysis, to really look at what data we had available at the time, which is certainly a lot less than we have now. Now we have a lot more data, a lot more models, a lot more observation. Also, we have a lot more newscasts. We have to do the newspaper, we have to do the website, we have to do social media, we have to do digital, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, the whole bit, all of this stuff. And it feels like the role of the broadcast meteorologists and the ability for them to actually really get their hands dirty in engaging in the data is maybe giving way to an increased amount of communication. I think some weather service meteorologists might feel the same way, that the
Hmm.
DSS is sort of impinging or shifting, maybe not impinging, but certainly shifting, um, shifting the amount of work that we do and the types of work that we do. Is that something that you see the NWA and bringing these different groups together? Is that an opportunity for us as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely right. I mean, there's with both things that you mentioned, um, and I don't know how people that have to keep up with social media and their broadcasts and their forecasts and evolving conditions. I just don't know how they do it. So props to everybody out there doing it, every day. Um, but as far as communication and decision support, I think that is something that the National Weather Association can help with. Um, I think with the annual meeting for sure we can have, and one of the sessions that I want to see, or like sort of ideas play out in sessions, is where we do look at some of these events and look at it from a, sort of a situational, what do we know from people that research how to communicate? What do we know from, how the event was communicated maybe? What do we know from, what forecast or what information is available at what time, and some things like that. So I think as far as the annual meeting, we can try to you know talk about some of these big issues, maybe get some interaction between members at the meeting, and then I'm hoping that we will have the opportunity to have um, groups of people be able to discuss these sorts of things that are relevant to the different members online, or maybe not online on a computer, but in our as we start rolling out some of these tools that encourage interactivity.
One question from the audience, talking about something that you've actually published on in the Journal of Operational Meteorology, which is another NWA benefit, is tornado communications regarding the deaf and hard of hearing communities. Um, are vulnerabilities like that, vulnerable groups with specific needs or interest, is that something that could get a focus in sort of the broader conversation in an annual meeting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, the annual meeting, the president does set the theme, but a lot of the meeting is member driven. I mean, members submit abstracts and can submit ideas for like special topic proposals and session ideas. So, yeah, I mean, definitely this is something that I know there are several members that are really focused on this, the idea of especially communicating or lessening the vulnerability in tornadoes to people who are deaf or hard of hearing, like Trevor, who introduced us, or takes care of the webinar. I guess I can't remember if he actually introduced us or if you did.
He's here
But
behind the
he's
scenes.
behind the scenes arranging it if he didn't. um, Jennifer Sari at the National Weather Service, I think in Huntsville, who is one of our co-authors. There are people that are throughout the different sectors who are passionate about these ideas, um, not just with the deaf and hard of hearing, which the paper was about, but other vulnerabilities too. People whose second language is not, or for whom English is a second language. Um, you know, Communicating with those groups of people, making sure they can understand what's being presented when there's not a lot of time to look around for other sources of information like a tornado. Um, the other part of my research was with people who were legally blind. And it's important to say that just because you're blind, or just because you are deaf, or just because you don't speak English doesn't automatically make you more vulnerable. But these are things that statistically are associated with higher vulnerability.
The you mentioned how the NWA annual meeting is largely member driven, right? That we accept session proposals, abstracts, obviously sort of the main way that people get into it. Maybe the session proposal part of the meeting this year may be a little bit more important than it has been in the past because we're maybe expanding the notion of what a session might look like. It may not be just an hour and a half of engaging speakers talking about PowerPoint slides, but it may be we may be talking about smaller groups or that sort of thing. How else, sort of beyond involvement in the annual meeting, how can people get involved in the NWA?
We have a lot of committees that people can volunteer with. We have a volunteer form that people can check off to indicate that they're interested. At least I believe all of our members or all of our emails as board members are available on the website. So people can reach out if they have no other, if they don't feel like they have any other connection, that you can reach out to a board member or to me but we do keep the running list of people who are interested in volunteering for things. So they can volunteer to be on a committee. You can volunteer. Usually the people that organize the meeting, they'll reach out to the committees to look for people to review the abstracts, but they often need people outside of just the people that are in those committees. So people can get involved that way. If you have background in research or if you read journal articles, you could volunteer to read the manuscripts that are submitted to the journal. So there's a lot of ways I think that people can get involved like that way through the organization.
And as you mentioned earlier, we're working on a new platform that would allow folks to communicate, directly, sort of thinking message boards, but certainly bigger than that.
Yes.
Is another way to sort of stay connected. And then obviously the annual meeting is sort of the sort of big visible way. And I know a lot of folks enjoy, just again coming back to that family reunion and getting back close to each other again. Talk a little bit about you come from a geography background, in your undergrad, and we've seen a lot of shifts, as a result of things like climate change. What do you think our role as the NWA is when in talking about climate change? And it can be a hot topic, although there's pretty strong evidence that it's happening and we're involved. What is the NWA's role in talking about climate change with regards to our focus on operational meteorology? How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're a scientific organization. I mean, meteorology is a science, and I think as a scientific organization, we have to, not sure what the word is I'm looking for, but we have to be public when scientists have agreed on something. If there's consensus among 95% or 99% of scientists that something is happening, that humans probably play a role in it somehow, then I think as an organization we should support that. We should support that scientific consensus, because at the heart our members are scientists. That's not to say we can't allow some scientists to express an alternate perspective. I know at one of the annual meetings we had a really great it wasn't a presentation, it was kind of like a panel discussion moderated by Gene Asco, where people presented different facts. And I know we're in this age of sort of like alternative facts kind of thing, but there are ways that you can present things that the other what would you want the other side to know about your argument for or against something. So I think we can have a scientific discussion using science and scientific facts. But when there is that consensus, I think the organization should support it.
Yeah, I think the idea that if you have such a weight of evidence supporting one side, that the evidence to the contrary, if that's going to be presented and given an audience, probably needs to have that kind of weight to it. It needs to be extraordinary. in order to do that. And we're certainly open as an organization to seeing extraordinary new evidence. But in light of, absent that, the weight of the evidence is very much that climate change is a thing, that humans are causing it, and that, at the same time, there are things we can do about it,
Mhm.
going forward. We don't just have to accept a sort of fatalistic, outcome, that we can actually take steps to limit its impact, to mitigate it, and to adapt to it, which is where a lot of the community is these days. Um, so coming back to NWA membership benefits, and we talked about how to get involved. Don't ask what the NWA can do for you, ask what you can do for the NWA. We've answered that question. Um, let's talk a little bit about what the NWA can do for people, for members. And I think, we talk a lot about, our annual meeting as a big draw. We have the Journal of Operational Meteorology. We have an online platform. We get a newsletter. We have, the camaraderie and fellowship that comes with, spending time with other NWA members, whether that's the national organization or with our local chapters. What of all of that, or maybe something I haven't mentioned, what is your favorite NWA benefit, and maybe something that people may not know about or may not take full advantage of?
I mean, I have really enjoyed being involved with committees and eventually the board and now being president. Though my term just started. So, I mean, I, I tend to join a professional organization for that involvement, not just to attend the meeting, but sort of to have that experience to interact with other people who have, similar interests, and I like getting involved. And so I think for me, the ability to get involved is one of the most rewarding parts of being part of an organization.
Is there a benefit that you think that that folks who may have just joined the NWA, or maybe have been longtime members, and they come to the meeting and they get the newsletter and that's about it? Is there something that you would maybe point them to say, hey, you should check this out?
Um, I'm not sure about checking something out. I have to think about that one. But I think I think just the interaction. I mean, if you're a member that has been a member for 20 years or 30 years, um, what can you offer to a member who just joined, like, you know, this month or 5 months ago? Um, because I think a lot of times we have students especially join because they're looking to get into the field. Um, and it's great to join an organization to sort of start building that community that, if you have a question about, what am I interested in being a meteorologist for a private company that is forecasting, risk or something. um, who do I know that does that? Well, I don't know anybody. Well, maybe somebody in the NWA, has that position or something, so it can connect you with different experiences and help broaden your understanding of like what careers are out there for young people. Um, and I think that the people that may just come to the meeting or read the newsletter, everybody has something to offer in terms of um, could you maybe get in touch with, be a mentor for someone who's just joining the organization, or maybe you have such great knowledge from your 20 years of experience in your position that you can share it at the meeting. Speak at one of the um, in one of the sessions, submit an abstract, um, share your thoughts that way. And then we keep mentioning the tools and the platform that we're going to roll out soon to encourage interactivity. So we want to see all members, members that have been around forever and brand new members kind of interacting with each other um, outside of the annual meeting as well.
I might even say that this webinar that we're doing today is another way that you propose a webinar topic. We've got them scheduled out through most of the first half of the year, but we're always looking for additional topics for things that would be of interest to not just NWA members, but to the enterprise at large. Anything else you want to talk about here as we sort of draw it to a close here?
Just want to encourage people to attend the annual meeting. It should be great. We will have remind you that we will be opening up the call for abstracts soon, but even if you don't want to submit an abstract, it's still great to just come and attend. Hopefully most people will be able to attend in person, but even if not, it should be a good experience. NWA does the online really well. I chose to attend last year's meeting virtually, just because of, I don't know, I wasn't quite ready to travel, I don't think yet. But I've been to other conferences, and I think NWA does it really well. And I did not attend the AMS this past year, so I can't compare it. But and I probably wouldn't compare it anyway. But just to say, we do it well. So yeah, come to the meeting or submit an abstract for the meeting. And if you have ideas, if there's something you want to chat with me about, feel free to send me an email.
Sounds great. Dr. Kathy Sherman-Morris, professor at Mississippi State, associate dean and president of the National Weather Association. Thank you for your time and for talking to us a little bit about yourself and what you have going on for the year for NWA.
Thank you. And it's assistant dean.
Assistant dean. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the correction.
I enjoyed being here. Thank you for interviewing me.
No problem. My pleasure. And I'm looking forward to working with you this year and in the years to come. In wrapping up, as we mentioned, we do have a number of webinars planned, for the next few months. And we've got those coming up for you. They'll be posted on the NWA website. We'll promote them on our social media channels as well. And this will be posted on YouTube, as all of them are. They'll post to be on YouTube when it's all said and done. Until the next time, I am Nate Johnson, the immediate past president of the NWA. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.